I'm 32 years old, and the moment I walked into that courtroom and saw my parents roll their eyes at me, like I was some annoying inconvenience rather than their daughter, I knew I'd made the right decision. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. They'd underestimated me my entire life, and they were about to learn that was a mistake. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and clinical. My parents were already seated at the defendant's table with their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a navy suit who'd probably cost them a fortune. My mom was wearing her respectable church lady outfit, a cream-colored blazer and pearls. My dad had on his best suit, the one he wore to funerals and important business meetings. They looked like the perfect, upstanding couple they'd always pretended to be. When I walked through the door with my lawyer, my mom actually sighed audibly, and my dad's eye roll was so pronounced that even the court reporter noticed and looked up. My mom leaned over to whisper something to their attorney, who glanced at me with barely concealed amusement. The message was clear. They thought I was wasting everyone's time. This was a probate court hearing, specifically regarding my grandmother's estate. My grandmother, my dad's mother, had passed away 6 months earlier, and the will reading had been complicated. Actually, that's putting it mildly. It had been a nuclear bomb dropped into the middle of our already dysfunctional family. My grandmother, Dorothy, had been wealthy. Not billionaire wealthy, but comfortable. She'd owned her home outright, had substantial savings, investments, and a life insurance policy worth $800,000. In total, her estate was valued at roughly $2.3 million. For the last 5 years of her life, she'd lived with my parents after a stroke left her needing daily care. My parents had always made it very clear that they expected to inherit everything. They'd moved her into their home, converted their dining room into a bedroom for her, and my mother had quit her part-time job to be her caregiver. They talked openly about what they'd do with Dorothy's money when she passed: renovate the kitchen, buy a vacation home in Florida, finally retire early. I lived 3 hours away and visited Grandma Dorothy every few weeks. We'd always been close. She was the one who believed in me when my parents didn't, who paid for my college when they refused, who told me I was smart and capable when they called me difficult and ungrateful. She was my champion in a family that had never wanted me. See, I'm the youngest of 3 children, and I've always been the black sheep. My older brother Marcus is a surgeon, the pride and joy of the family. My sister Claire is a corporate lawyer married to a finance guy, with 2 perfect children and a house in the suburbs. And then there's me, Emma, the social worker who never married, who lives in a modest apartment, who chose a career helping traumatized kids instead of making money. My parents had never hidden their disappointment in me. At every family gathering, they'd introduce Marcus as our son, the doctor, and Claire as our daughter, the successful attorney, and me as just our other daughter, Emma. The contrast was deliberate and painful. So when Grandma Dorothy's will was read, and it turned out she'd left me 40% of her estate, nearly $1 million, while splitting the remaining 60% between my parents and my siblings, my family lost their minds. My mother screamed that it was invalid, that Grandma Dorothy had been mentally incompetent, that I must have manipulated her. My father accused me of elder abuse, of poisoning Grandma against the family. Marcus and Claire didn't say much, but their expressions made their feelings clear. I didn't deserve this money. I hadn't earned it. I was stealing their inheritance. Within a week, my parents had filed a legal challenge to the will, claiming undue influence and lack of mental capacity. They argued that because Dorothy lived with them and they provided her care, any substantial bequest to me must have been the result of manipulation during my visits. They painted me as a predatory daughter who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable old woman. Their lawyer had sent me a letter suggesting I do the right thing and decline the inheritance to preserve family harmony. When I refused, they doubled down. They filed for a full probate investigation, submitted affidavits claiming I'd isolated Dorothy from the family, and even tried to get testimony from Dorothy's doctor about her mental state. That's how we ended up here, 6 months later, in a courtroom where my parents were absolutely confident they would win. They had the better lawyer. They had Marcus and Claire ready to testify on their behalf. They had 5 years of being Dorothy's primary caregivers as evidence of their devotion. And they had the narrative that fit everyone's expectations. The disappointing youngest daughter who'd swooped in and stolen what rightfully belonged to the family. What they didn't have was the truth. As I took my seat next to my lawyer, a brilliant woman named Patricia Chun who'd taken my case partially pro bono because she believed in it, I could feel my parents' contempt radiating across the courtroom. My mother's jaw was set in that tight way that meant she was furious, but trying to look composed. My father kept shaking his head slightly, like I was a misbehaving child who'd gone too far this time. Their lawyer, Ms. Harrison, looked supremely confident as she organized her papers. She'd probably told my parents this would be a slam dunk. Grandma Dorothy had lived with them. They'd provided years of care. They had witnesses who could testify to their devotion. And I was just the granddaughter who visited occasionally, the one who'd somehow convinced an elderly woman to give her a fortune. Judge Caroline Martinez entered, and we all stood. She was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She'd been a probate judge for over 20 years, and, according to Patricia, she had a reputation for seeing through manipulation and getting to the truth. "Please be seated," Judge Martinez said, settling into her chair and reviewing the file in front of her. "This is the matter of the estate of Dorothy and Mitchell, specifically regarding the challenge to the will filed by Robert and Linda Mitchell. Let's begin." Ms. Harrison stood smoothly. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of undue influence. My clients, Robert and Linda Mitchell, provided exemplary care to Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell for the final 5 years of her life. They welcomed her into their home, provided round-the-clock care, and sacrificed significantly to ensure her comfort and well-being. I watched my mother dab at her eyes with a tissue. She'd always been good at performing emotion. However, Ms. Harrison continued, the respondent, Emma Mitchell, who had minimal contact with Mrs. Mitchell and provided no substantial care, somehow convinced her grandmother to leave her 40% of a multi-million-dollar estate. This is clearly a case of a younger person taking advantage of an elderly woman's vulnerability and confusion. We ask that the court set aside this portion of the will and redistribute the estate according to what Mrs. Mitchell's true intentions would have been, to primarily benefit those who actually cared for her. The way she said actually cared, while looking at me, made my blood boil. Like my visits, my phone calls, my genuine relationship with my grandmother meant nothing because I hadn't lived under the same roof. Judge Martinez made some notes. "Ms. Chun, your response?" Patricia stood, and I noticed she was completely calm. That was a good sign. "Your Honor, this case is not what it appears to be. The petitioners would like you to believe this is about a devoted family being cheated by an opportunistic granddaughter. What it actually is a case of financial abuse, manipulation, and a grandmother who knew exactly what she was doing when she protected her granddaughter from a family that had exploited her for years." My mother gasped audibly. My father's face turned red. "That is an outrageous accusation." Ms. Harrison objected. "It's a factual statement that we will prove with substantial evidence," Patricia said calmly. Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell was of completely sound mind when she drafted her will. In fact, she worked with 2 different attorneys over a 3-year period to ensure her wishes were crystal clear and legally unassailable. She knew her son and daughter-in-law would challenge her decisions, and she took extensive steps to document her reasoning. Judge Martinez's eyebrows raised slightly. 2 different attorneys? "Yes, Your Honor." Mrs. Mitchell first consulted with attorney James Morrison in 2019, and then, wanting a second opinion and additional protection, she worked with attorney Rebecca Stone in 2021 to revise and reinforce her will. Both will testify today. I saw Ms. Harrison's confident expression falter slightly. This clearly wasn't information they'd had. Additionally, Patricia continued, "We have extensive documentation of the financial abuse Mrs. Mitchell suffered while in her son and daughter-in-law's care. We have recordings, made by Mrs. Mitchell herself, of conversations that reveal the true nature of the care she received. We have bank records, medical records, and testimony from healthcare providers. By the time we're finished, Your Honor, it will be abundantly clear why Dorothy Mitchell chose to protect a substantial portion of her estate and leave it to the one family member she trusted. My father leaned over to whisper urgently to Ms. Harrison. My mother's tissue was now clenched in her white-knuckled fist. Claire and Marcus, sitting in the gallery behind my parents, looked at each other with visible concern. Judge Martinez studied Patricia for a long moment, then looked at my parents, then at me. This sounds like we have a lot to cover. Ms. Harrison, call your first witness. As my mother stood to take the stand, she shot me a look of pure venom. She still thought she'd win. She still thought I was just the disappointing daughter making baseless accusations. She still thought her performance of the martyred caregiver would carry the day. She had no idea what was about to happen. Because what my parents didn't know, what they couldn't have known because they'd always underestimated me, was that Grandma Dorothy hadn't just left me money. She'd left me evidence. Years of it. Carefully documented, legally obtained, and absolutely damning. And I was about to reveal everything. My mother settled into the witness stand with practiced grace, smoothing her skirt and arranging her face into an expression of dignified grief. She'd always been good at this, the performance of being the perfect, long-suffering caretaker. I'd watched her do it at church, at family gatherings, anywhere there was an audience to witness her sacrifice. Ms. Harrison approached with a warm smile. Mrs. Mitchell, can you describe your relationship with your mother-in-law, Dorothy Mitchell? Dorothy was like a mother to me, my mom said, her voice quavering slightly. When she had her stroke and needed care, Robert and I didn't hesitate. We brought her into our home, converted our dining room into a bedroom for her, and I quit my job to care for her full-time. It was challenging, but it was also a blessing. We had 5 wonderful years together. And during those 5 years, what kind of care did you provide? Everything. I bathed her, dressed her, managed her medications, cooked all her meals, took her to doctor's appointments. I was there 24/7. Robert helped in the evenings and on weekends, but the day-to-day care was my responsibility. It was exhausting, but we loved her. We wanted her final years to be comfortable and filled with family. I watched Judge Martinez taking notes, her expression neutral. And what about the respondent, Emma Mitchell? What was her involvement in Dorothy's care? My mother's expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the mouth, a flash of something cold in her eyes. Emma visited occasionally, maybe once a month, sometimes less. She'd stay for an hour or two, chat with Dorothy, and then leave. She never helped with actual care, never offered to give me a break, never helped with medications or bathing or any of the difficult parts. She just showed up when it was convenient for her. Did Dorothy seem to enjoy these visits? Oh, Dorothy always perked up when Emma came. Emma was always Dorothy's favorite, even when she didn't deserve it. Dorothy paid for Emma's college, when Emma refused to pursue a more practical career. Dorothy always indulged her. Ms. Harrison nodded sympathetically. When did you first learn about the terms of Dorothy's will? At the reading 6 months ago. We were shocked. After everything we'd done, all the years of sacrifice, Dorothy left 40% of her estate to Emma, the granddaughter who barely visited, who never helped, who lived her own life while we dedicated ours to Dorothy's care. It felt like a betrayal. Did you suspect undue influence? Of course. Emma must have said something during those visits, convinced Dorothy that she deserved more than the people who actually took care of her. It's the only explanation that makes sense. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. No further questions. Patricia stood for cross-examination, and I noticed she was holding a thick folder. Mrs. Mitchell, you testified that you provided round-the-clock care for Dorothy. Is that correct? Yes. And you quit your job to do so? I did. It was a sacrifice, but family comes first. What was your job before you quit? My mother hesitated slightly. I was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. How many hours per week? About 15. So, when you say you quit your job, you're referring to a part-time position of 15 hours per week. It was still a job, still income we lost. How much did you make annually in that position? I don't remember exactly. According to tax returns, it was approximately $12,000 per year. Is that accurate? My mother's jaw tightened. Approximately. And how much was Dorothy's monthly income from her pension and Social Security? I don't know off the top of my head. According to Dorothy's financial records, it was $4,200 per month. That's $50,400 per year. Did Dorothy contribute to household expenses while living with you? A pause. She helped with some things. Mrs. Mitchell, did Dorothy pay you rent? We called it a contribution to household expenses. How much? $2,000 per month. Patricia made a note. $24,000 per year. So Dorothy paid you $24,000 annually in household contributions, which is double what you lost by quitting your part-time job. Is that correct? She was living in our home. It cost money to care for her. I'm sure it did. Let's talk about that care. You testified that you bathed Dorothy, dressed her, managed her medications. Is that accurate? Yes. Dorothy's medical records show that for the first 3 years she lived with you, she had a home health aide who came 5 days a week from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The aide's notes indicate that she handled bathing, dressing, and medication management. Were you aware of this? My mother shifted uncomfortably. The aide helped, but I was still responsible for overall care. The aide was there 30 hours per week. That's not occasional help, Mrs. Mitchell. That's primary care. And who paid for this aide? Silence. Mrs. Mitchell? Who paid the aide's salary of approximately $3,000 per month? Dorothy had insurance that covered some of it. Her insurance covered $500 per month. The remaining $2,500 came from Dorothy's own accounts. So Dorothy paid for her own primary caregiver, paid you $2,000 per month in rent, and you're claiming you made this enormous sacrifice. I was still there. I still managed everything. Let's talk about what you managed. Do you recognize this? Patricia held up a document. My mother squinted. I don't know what that is. This is a power of attorney document signed by Dorothy Mitchell in 2018, giving you and your husband control over her financial accounts. Is that your signature as witness? Yes, but that was so we could help her manage her bills. And did you help her manage her bills? Of course. Patricia pulled out another stack of papers. These are Dorothy's bank statements from 2018 to 2023. Let's look at some interesting transactions. In October 2019, there's a withdrawal of $15,000 with the notation kitchen renovation. Did Dorothy approve this withdrawal? We discussed it. She agreed the kitchen needed updating. She agreed to pay for renovations to your kitchen? She benefited from them too. She lived there. In March 2020, there's a withdrawal of $22,000 for a family vacation. Did Dorothy go on this vacation? My mother's face was getting red. She wasn't well enough to travel, but we needed a break from caregiving. She understood. So Dorothy paid $22,000 for a vacation she didn't attend? We were burned out. We deserved a break. In July 2021, there's a $30,000 withdrawal for a vehicle. What vehicle was this? Dorothy's car was old. We needed a reliable vehicle for her appointments. But Dorothy didn't drive anymore, did she? No, but we needed to drive her places. So, you used Dorothy's money to buy yourselves a new car? It was for her benefit. Judge Martinez was leaning forward now, very interested. Patricia continued. Mrs. Mitchell, over the 5 years Dorothy lived with you, records show withdrawals from her accounts totaling approximately $347,000 beyond her monthly household contribution. Can you account for all of these withdrawals? We used that money for her care, medical expenses, household costs, everything she needed. Dorothy's medical expenses were largely covered by Medicare. Her prescriptions cost approximately $200 per month. Even being generous with estimates, her actual care costs couldn't have exceeded $50,000 over 5 years. Where did the other $300,000 go? My mother looked at their lawyer desperately. Ms. Harrison stood. Objection, Your Honor. This is turning into an interrogation about financial matters that aren't relevant to the question of whether Dorothy was of sound mind when she made her will. On the contrary, Patricia said calmly. This is extremely relevant to understanding why Dorothy made the decisions she did. The petitioners claimed Dorothy was confused or influenced. I'm showing that Dorothy was clear-headed enough to realize her son and daughter-in-law were systematically draining her accounts and wanted to protect what remained. Judge Martinez looked at my mother with a new expression, not sympathy, but scrutiny. I'll allow it. Continue, Miss Chen. Patricia turned back to my mother. Mrs. Mitchell, were you aware that Dorothy kept a journal? The color drained from my mother's face. I don't know anything about a journal. Really? Because in her journal, Dorothy documented her concerns about her finances. Let me read an entry from March 2020. Patricia pulled out a leather-bound book. March 15, 2020. Linda showed me the credit card statement today. She said, I charged $22,000 to travel websites for a family vacation. I don't remember doing this. I asked to see the charges, but she said I was confused. She's making me feel crazy. I'm not crazy. I didn't book any vacation. My mother's hands were shaking. She was confused. Let me read another entry. July 2021. Discovered today that the new SUV in the driveway was purchased with $30,000 from my savings account. Linda says I approved it, but I have no memory of this. I asked Robert, and he got angry, said I was being ungrateful after everything they've done for me. I'm starting to understand that I need to protect myself. Those entries aren't real. She was elderly. She was confused about dates and events. The journal was reviewed by a forensic document examiner who confirmed it was written in Dorothy's hand over a period of several years and showed no signs of cognitive decline in the writing or reasoning. But we have something even more compelling than the journal. Patricia pulled out a small recording device. Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording. Dorothy Mitchell, concerned about her financial situation and her treatment, began recording conversations in the final 2 years of her life. These recordings were made legally. This is a one-party consent state, and Dorothy had every right to record conversations in which she participated. Ms. Harrison shot to her feet. Your Honor, we were not informed about any recordings. We disclosed them in discovery last week, Patricia said smoothly. Perhaps Ms. Harrison hasn't had time to review all the evidence. Judge Martinez waved her hand. Play the recording. Patricia pressed play. The sound quality was muffled but clear enough. I recognized my grandmother's voice immediately, and it made my chest ache. Linda, I need to talk to you about my accounts. That was Grandma Dorothy, her voice tired but firm. Not this again, Dorothy. We've been over this. My mother's voice, annoyed. I want to see my bank statements. All of them. I know there's money missing. You're confused. You keep forgetting the things you approve. We've been over this with your doctor. I'm not confused. I want my statements. I want to know where my money is going. Fine. You want to know? We've spent your money taking care of you. The home modifications, the medical equipment, the special food you need, the medication, everything. Do you have any idea how much it costs to take care of someone 24/7? We've sacrificed everything for you, and this is the thanks we get? Accusations. I paid you $2,000 a month for rent. I pay for my own aid. My medical costs are covered by insurance. Linda, I'm not stupid. I know how much things cost. Well, maybe if you weren't such a burden, we wouldn't have to use your money to make our lives bearable. Do you think it's fun having an old woman in our dining room? Do you think I enjoy spending every day dealing with your needs instead of living my own life? The least you can do is help pay for the stress you're causing. There was silence on the recording, then my grandmother's voice quieter. I see. I understand now. The recording ended. The courtroom was completely silent. My mother was white as a sheet. My father had his head in his hands. Even Ms. Harrison looked shaken. We have 17 more recordings, Patricia said quietly. Would the court like to hear them? That's taken out of context. My mother stammered from the witness stand. I was stressed. I was exhausted. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said, Mrs. Mitchell. And your mother-in-law heard you clearly. Let me play one more. This one is from 6 months before Dorothy's death. Another recording started. This one was my father's voice. Mom, we need to talk about your will. Robert, I've already made arrangements. I know what the lawyer said, but that's not fair. After everything Linda and I have done, you're giving 40% to Emma? Emma, who barely visits? Emma, who's done nothing? Emma is the only one who visits me because she wants to, not because she's obligated. Emma calls me every week just to talk. Emma brought me books and actually reads them with me. Emma treats me like a person, not a burden. That's ridiculous. We've given up years of our lives for you. You've given up nothing, Robert. I pay you rent. I pay for my own care. You've used my money to renovate your house, buy new cars, take vacations. Don't think I don't know. We deserve compensation for our time. Then you should have discussed compensation, not stolen from me. I'm protecting what's left for Emma because she's the only one who loves me for who I am, not for what I can give her. If you don't change that will, you'll regret it. We can make your life very difficult. You already have, son. You already have. The recording ended. Judge Martinez's expression had gone from neutral to deeply troubled. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, did you threaten your mother to try to change her will? My father stood up shakily. Your Honor, we were upset. We didn't mean. Sit down, Mr. Mitchell. You'll have your chance to testify. She looked at Patricia. Continue, Counselor. Your Honor, we have medical records showing that in the final year of Dorothy's life, she missed several medications and had 2 falls that were never reported to her doctors. Her home health aides notes indicate concerns about neglect. We have testimony from Dorothy's primary care physician stating that when he asked Dorothy privately about her care, she became tearful and said, "They're angry with me all the time now." Patricia pulled out more documents. We also have Dorothy's revised will from 2021, drafted specifically after she realized the extent of the financial abuse. She met with attorney Rebecca Stone 3 times to ensure her wishes were crystal clear. Attorney Stone's notes indicate that Dorothy was completely lucid, understood her assets perfectly, and was adamant that she needed to protect her estate from her son and daughter-in-law. In her own words, documented by Attorney Stone, "They think I'm a stupid old woman who doesn't notice what they're doing. But I notice everything. I notice the bills they pay with my accounts that have nothing to do with my care. I notice how they talk about me when they think I can't hear. I notice that my son looks at me with resentment, and my daughter-in-law can barely stand to be in the same room. The only person who sees me as a human being instead of a bank account is Emma. She deserves to be protected from them." I felt tears streaming down my face. Hearing Grandma Dorothy's words, knowing what she'd endured, knowing she'd protected me even while being mistreated, it was overwhelming. Patricia placed a final document in front of the judge. This is a letter Dorothy wrote to Emma, to be delivered after her death. With the court's permission, I'd like Emma to read it. Judge Martinez nodded. Please. I stood on shaking legs and took the letter. My grandmother's handwriting, still beautiful despite her age, covered the page. I had to pause several times to compose myself as I read aloud. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine your father and Linda are making your life difficult. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them while I was alive the way I'm trying to protect you now. You are the only one who treated me like Dorothy, not like a burden, not like a wallet, but like a person. You listened to my stories even when you'd heard them before. You brought me books you thought I'd enjoy. You asked about my opinions, my feelings, my life. You made me feel valued when everyone else made me feel like an inconvenience. I discovered what Robert and Linda were doing with my money about 2 years before I died. At first, I was angry. Then I was sad. Then I realized I needed to be practical. They had access to my accounts through the power of attorney, and I couldn't stop them without causing a massive family fight that would have made my last years even more miserable. So I let them take what they wanted, knowing I was documenting everything, knowing I was protecting what remained for you. The money I'm leaving you isn't just money, Emma. It's freedom. Freedom to keep doing the work you love, without financial stress. Freedom to live your life without having to compromise your values for a paycheck. Freedom from ever having to depend on people who don't value you. Your father and Linda will fight this will. I know they will. They'll say I was confused or that you manipulated me. They'll perform grief and shock and wounded innocence. Don't believe them. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. I was completely sound of mind. I worked with 2 different attorneys specifically, so no one could question my capacity. I recorded conversations and kept journals because I knew evidence would be needed. I did everything I could to make this stick. You deserve this money, Emma. Not because you took care of me, although your love and attention meant everything, but because you're the only one who deserves it. You're the only one with integrity, compassion, and genuine goodness. Don't let them take this from you. Stand firm, be strong, and know that your grandmother loves you more than anything in this world. All my love, Grandma Dorothy. By the time I finished reading, I was openly sobbing. So was half the courtroom. Judge Martinez was wiping her eyes. Even the court reporter looked emotional. My mother was crying too, but her tears looked different, desperate, panicked, the tears of someone whose performance had finally failed. Judge Martinez cleared her throat. I've heard enough. Ms. Harrison, unless you have compelling evidence that contradicts what we've just seen and heard, I'm prepared to make my ruling. Ms. Harrison looked defeated. Your Honor, my clients were under tremendous stress caring for an elderly family member. While their language and actions were perhaps not ideal, that doesn't mean. Not ideal. Judge Martinez's voice was sharp. Ms. Harrison, the evidence shows systematic financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and possible neglect. Your clients used a power of attorney meant to help an elderly woman as a license to drain her accounts for personal expenses. They threatened her when she tried to protect her assets. They created an environment so hostile that she felt she had to secretly record conversations to protect herself. This isn't a case of undue influence by the granddaughter. This is a case of a lucid, clear-thinking woman protecting herself and her beloved granddaughter from predatory family members. My father stood up. Your Honor, please. Mr. Mitchell, sit down and be quiet or I will hold you in contempt. Judge Martinez's tone left no room for argument. Here is my ruling. The will of Dorothy and Mitchell stands as written. The challenge is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential financial exploitation of an elderly person. The evidence suggests possible criminal conduct. My mother gasped. Criminal? You can't. I absolutely can, Mrs. Mitchell. And I am. Additionally, I am ordering that Robert and Linda Mitchell reimburse the estate for any withdrawals from Dorothy Mitchell's accounts that cannot be directly tied to her care or living expenses. The executor of the estate, she looked at me, will provide documentation of all withdrawals over the 5-year period, and the Mitchells will have 30 days to account for these funds or return them. Ms. Harrison was frantically whispering with my parents, who both looked like they might be sick. Court is adjourned. Judge Martinez's gavel came down with a sharp crack. As people started filing out, my parents tried to approach me. My father's face was ashen. Emma, please, we need to talk about this.
No.
I was surprised by how steady my voice was. We don't. We're still your parents, my mother said desperately. We made mistakes, but we're family. You stopped being family when you treated Grandma Dorothy like an ATM and me like an inconvenience. She was right about you. She was right about everything. Marcus and Claire approached tentatively. Claire spoke first. We didn't know. About the money they took, about the recordings. We just thought. You thought I was the problem. The disappointing daughter who didn't deserve anything. You didn't question it because it fit the narrative you've always believed about me. Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. What are you going to do? I'm going to honor Grandma Dorothy's wishes. I'm going to use this money exactly how she wanted, to live a good life doing work I love, without having to compromise my values. And I'm going to make sure you all face the consequences of what you did to her. As I walked out of the courthouse with Patricia, my phone started buzzing. Marcus, Claire, aunts, uncles, everyone who'd heard what happened and suddenly wanted to reach out. I turned my phone off. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. You did it. Dorothy would be proud. I looked back at the courthouse one more time. Through the glass doors, I could see my parents standing with Miss Harrison, all three looking devastated. My mother was crying again, real tears this time. My father was arguing with someone on his phone, probably already trying to figure out how to avoid criminal charges. I felt a lot of things in that moment: grief for my grandmother, anger at my parents, sadness for the family that could have been but never was. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: free. Grandma Dorothy had given me more than money. She'd given me validation, protection, and proof that I'd been right all along. That I wasn't the problem. That I wasn't ungrateful or difficult or disappointing. I was just the only one who'd loved her for who she was instead of what she had. And in the end, she'd made sure I was protected the same way I'd protected her, by seeing me, valuing me, and refusing to let anyone take that away. 3 months later, the district attorney filed charges against my parents for financial exploitation of an elderly person. They eventually pled guilty to reduced charges and were ordered to repay $278,000 to the estate. They lost their house in the process. I never spoke to them again. I used Grandma Dorothy's money exactly as she intended. I paid off my student loans, bought a modest house, and set up a foundation providing college scholarships for foster kids pursuing careers in social work. The foundation is named the Dorothy and Mitchell Foundation for Compassionate Care. Because that's what she gave me, and that's what she would have wanted me to pass on: compassion, care, and the unwavering belief that some people deserve to be protected from those who would use them. Even when those people are family. Especially when those people are family.